Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear students, Assalamu alaikum. In the last class, we studied the elaboration phase, in which we studied that we get the requirements about the functionality, about the data, and then we define or describe the models, we design the models, and we studied the use case diagram and use case descriptions, and along with the conceptual model that contains the class diagram. So today we will study the construction phase, and in the construction phase, we have analysis in the start. So we will study this today. So our agenda of the class is construction phase. So we will study that. So here we have construction, and we can see that here we have the graph higher that is for the analysis and design. That means construction will contain, in fact, the analysis. So today we are going to study the construction, and under the construction, we have the analysis. Here we can see that construction has different phases: the analysis phase, design phase, code phase, that we call the implementation phase, and the test phase. And for the analysis phase, it has shown us that the full use cases. So it meant that, in fact, we are going to get the full use case descriptions. There is the detail of the use case in the form of a table or any template provided, and then we can draw, definitely after the full dress use cases or full use cases, we can design the use case diagrams. So let's start with it. In fact, in the construction phase, the first stage of the construction phase is analysis. So we need to revisit the use cases. So it meant that, in fact, we will be considering the use cases that we have developed, the description of the use cases, and we will discuss those in detail. And which use cases we will be discussing right now? We are building in this iteration. For every iteration, what we are going to implement, we take the use cases of that iteration and we try to fill the details in it. So we will select those use cases that are to be developed in that particular iteration and enhance and expand those use cases, right? So by concentrating on the full detail of only a few use cases per iteration, we are reducing the amount of complexity we have to manage at any one time. So that means, in fact, we are not considering all the use cases, rather, we are considering only those use cases for the full details that we are going to implement in one iteration. So if we are going to implement few use cases in current iteration, we will not be dealing with the other use case descriptions. We will consider only those use case descriptions that are being developed or that are supposed to be developed in the current iteration. Remember that even though we are now in construction, we are still at the analysis stage. So to do a more detailed analysis than the analysis we did in the elaboration, although we did the analysis in elaboration, but it was not in detail. We said that we must have, in fact, very limited detail of the use case descriptions and the conceptual model. So we did not go into the much detail, right? So now in this phase, we are going to get the details about every use case and every detail of it. So therefore, we must bear in mind that we are only concerned with the problem. Again, we are not discussing the solution. We are not going to discuss the design. We are in the analysis phase. So we will be discussing what is required, right? And not the solution. So we are not discussing the solution right now. So we are looking at what the system has to do without worrying about how it will do it. So we are not concerned about the solution side. We are more towards the problem side still. So back to the use cases. During the elaboration, we produce short use cases. As I told you in that class, that we do not fill the all details in it. Rather, we just keep it short so that we may have more use cases describing the basic functionality. But now, in fact, we need the full details because we are in the analysis of construction, right? So construction phase analysis is there. So we will have to implement the full detail, the main flow, alternate flow, pre and post conditions until construction phase. So that means, in fact, we will have to implement all the details in those use case descriptions, in those tables, in those details that were, in fact, very short and that were not fully detailed use case descriptors. So the time has come to complete the full details, but only for the use cases we are dealing with in this iteration. Again, we will not fill all the use case descriptions, but only the details for those that are being implemented in the current iteration. So look at this diagram. This was the older diagram in which we said that we will not put the details, precondition, post-condition, main flow, but we just went for a very simple use case that a user can place bet, right? It is the example taken from the book. So in fact, the description was user places a bet on a particular horse after choosing the race. So the concept is the user will choose a race, then he will select a horse to bet on it, right? So in fact, this is the use case of place bet. So we did not fill the details in this use case descriptor, and now it has not got any details in it. So this diagram above shows an example short use case, each of the heading to be filled in. So we will have to fill in, right? So now let's move filling the details in the use cases. So the book explains how to fill in the headings with a specific example. So let's have a look at the place bet use case. So the use case name is place bet, right? So let's see the use case description. So in fact, if I show you again that table, now check. Here we have a heading precondition, here we have a heading post-condition, then main flow, then alternate flow, then exception flow. So we will have to put some data over here, some details for each and everything. So let's study the precondition, post-condition, and everything. So here, the precondition. Pre mean before, right? So this section describes the system condition which must be satisfied before the use case can actually take place. So it means that if I am going to do something and I'll have to log in into the system, for example, a banking system. So until I do not log in, I cannot make any transaction. If I want to buy anything and I am not logged in, and it is required that the precondition is that I must be logged in, that I can place an order. So the precondition is before placing any order, I must be logged in. So same is here. In the place bet example, a good precondition could be the user has successfully logged in. That means I'll have to write down over here the precondition the user has successfully logged in or user is logged in. He's already in the system. So now let's move to the post condition. The post condition describes the state the system will be in at the end of the use case. So when the process will complete, what will be the condition in which state the system will be. So the post condition is conventionally written in past tense language. So in our place bet example, the post condition would be the user placed a bet and the bet was recorded by the system. So now if I look at this use case description, so here precondition was he must be logged in and post condition he has placed a bet successfully, right? So very simply I am putting the details in it. Now let's move to the next thing, that is main flow. It describes the most likely the flow of events through the use case. So the main flow in the use case description is what is going to be done, what is supposed to be done, right? So it meant that there can be many things. For example, in the case of place bet, we can have errors we can have the alternate course of action. But in fact, what we uh, consider over here is, in fact, what is the main flow, what is the actual thing that we want to do. So let's see, it describes the most likely the flow of events through the use case. Clearly, in the place bet use case, many things can go wrong, right? Perhaps the user cancels the transaction. Maybe the user has insufficient funds to place a bet. These are all events we have to consider, but really, the most conventional flow through this use case is going to be a user successfully placing a bet. So that means the main flow would be that the thing that the user wants to do, that is the main flow in fact. So let's see what the steps can be in main flow. In the main flow, we need to detail the interaction between the actor and the system. Here is the main flow for place bet use case description, right? So what is the main flow? On initiation of place bet by the gambler, a list of the day's races are requested from the system. So the main flow is the gambler asks for the for all the races that are going to be in that particular day, right? And number two, the list of races are displayed. So the second point is he gets the list of all the races for that particular day. Number three, the gambler chooses the race to bet on A1 and so now here we have this alternate flow, but I'll teach you later. The simple thing is the gambler chooses the race, right? Number four, the system presents a list of the runners for that race. So now the when once the gambler has selected the race for that particular race, the system will show the list of all the horses, right? Then the step five, the gambler chooses the horse to bet on. So he just selects one horse for that particular bet and enters the required stake, right? Stake means, in fact, he is putting some money for that bet, right? And then once he has put that money or he has placed the stake, number six is the user confirms the transaction. He presses OK or submit or save. The system displays a confirmation message. So now look, in fact, this flow, these steps are showing us, in fact, the main flow that we wanted the system to do. There are no alternatives, no errors, nothing. Everything is that what we wanted to have. So in this way, we write down the main flow. So now if I just show you that particular template again. So over here somewhere, we will write down all the steps that we have studied for the main flow. Now, alternate flow, what can happen along with the same main flow? So now, notice that every actor system interaction is broken down into steps. So now we have seen that in fact the main flow we have broken down the steps and those steps are placed in the main flow. So now I was talking about the alternate flows. Alternate flows are simply less common but legitimate. That is, they can appear, right? And they are allowed. But legitimate flows through the use case. So it means that there would be or there can be some other steps, some other flow that is legitimate, that is allowed, and it must be shown in that use case description. The alternate flow will typically share many steps with the main flow. So it means that although we have a main flow that is doing the thing right, but there can be an alternate flow when and it can appear when we have that alternate condition. So what it can be? So we can notate the point in the main flow where the alternate flow takes over. So wherever we are writing down the main flow, we also mention the alternate as shown E1 in main flow. Let me show you over here. So when a gambler chooses the race to bet on, and here we have alternate flow, we have alternate flow. So we mentioned that he can do this, but alternate can also happen. And what that alternate can be, we can see it. For example, the user cancels the transaction. So he was in fact placing the bet, he was moving, and then suddenly he said, okay, I'm not playing. So what he did, he canceled the transaction. So after that alternate flow, we will have some post condition, because in the main flow, the post condition was the bet was successfully placed. But now, as he has cancelled, so the post condition would be no bets were placed. So this is the alternate flow that we must mention. And when we program, when we design and program, we must keep in mind that along with the main flow, we have the alternate flow. And then along with the alternate flow, we have the exception flow. Exception flow describes exceptional situations. In other words, a flow where an error has occurred or an event that couldn't have otherwise been predicted. For example, there can be an issue, there can be a situation that we were not expecting, but it appeared. So we will have to manage that in the case of error, in the case of some other condition that we will study soon. So in those cases, we will have to keep in mind how to manage those exceptions. So we will mention the exceptions, and then the programmer will write code to manage those. So now, in our place bet example, we could have following exception. The user credit is not sufficient to fund the bet. So look, here is an exception. It is not the error, but it is another flow exception that he could not pay, he cannot pay because he haven't got the enough fund in his account. So this is the exception flow, and the user is informed and the use case terminates. So here we say that okay, the process is complete, he has been informed, he hasn't got the enough money for that. So this is exception. Now if I show you, this is the detailed use case description now. After going through the analysis, getting all the details, all the requirements, what should be done, now we have got all the details, and we have got this particular full use case description. So now let's see with it. The use case name, place bet. There can be many templates for the use case descriptions, and you may find so many templates on the internet, but better is you must use the one that is more implemented in your society, so that you must be able to understand the use case description that are being used, the conventions that are being used in your local area. For example, the Pakistani market, if we are working in some software house, we must use their own template that they are using for the use case description. So now we have this example over here, and I will discuss another one. So over here, this is the template. So the name of the use case, place bet, short description. The user places a bet on a particular horse after choosing a race, right? Actor is who? The user, the gambler. Requirement, these are the requirement numbers, requirement 2.3, requirement 7.1. What is the precondition that we have studied? The user has successfully logged in, so he must be in the system. Post condition, a bet was placed and the bet was recorded by the system. So these were the things that we have studied. Now we have studied the main flow, and now all those steps that we have studied, we in fact put under the heading main flow. On initiation of place bet by the gambler, a list of the day's races are requested from the system. Point 2, the list of races are displayed. Point 3, the gambler chooses the race. And then point 4, the system presents a list of the runners for that race. Then point 5, the gambler chooses the horse to bet on. And then point 6, the user confirms the transaction. And 7, the system displays a confirmation message. So in fact, this is the main flow with the help of which a user can successfully place the bet. But we also studied the alternate flows. So we have another heading, alternate flow. The gambler cancels the transaction, alternate. So we have the post condition now for this particular alternate flow, that no bets were placed. And then we studied the exception flows. So the user's credit is not sufficient to fund the bet. So again, this is some exception that we were not expecting, but it appeared. So it must be handled. So the user is informed and the use case terminates, right? So this is one example or an example for the use case description that is given in your book. Let's check another description that I have placed from the internet. It is about the ATM, that the case study that we are studying from the March or February, I think. So we studied the ATM example of use case diagram, then class diagram, then sequence diagram. So let's talk about the use case description of ATM. So in fact, the use case is to withdraw the cash. Who is the actor? The customer, the account holder. Precondition: the recognized card use case has completely successful. That means there was another use case that has the name recognize the card. So when the user inserts the card, that process is invoked and user is get recognized or rejected. So the precondition is he has been recognized, and now the post condition is in fact he can withdraw the money, and then current balance is equal to original balance minus dispense cash minus service charges. Look, in fact, this is something that it is checking that whether we have got the balance accordingly. That is the balance that was there, how much I got dispensed, I withdraw, and the service charges. So that will become my current balance. If it was 1000 rupees, I took 500 rupees. That was the dispense cash for 500. From the 1000, I took 500 and 50 rupees were for the service charges. So now my current balance from 1000 minus 500 minus 50 will be 450. So the post condition is current balance 450 and cash reserve is original reserve minus dispense cash. So main scenario or main flow would be customer request cash withdrawal, ATM asks customer for amount. Keep in mind, in fact, he has been recognized, his PIN has been accepted, right, in the precondition. So it asks for the amount. Customer inputs desired amount. ATM dispenses amount of cash requested, and then it dispenses the card and the receipt, right? Normally, it is uh, a sequence that is not adopted because of Ployer property that in the past, when this uh, sequence was implemented, users Ployer was there when they received the cash and they normally used to leave the booth. So now HCI says that the machine must first dispense the card, then the money, and then the receipt. So we can see that now the machines, first of all, they dispense the card, and then they dispense the money or the receipt, because receipt is not that important, and a person waits for the money. So now the alternate courses, what else can happen? So customer card linked to multiple accounts. So if I have my card is linked to 2 or 3 accounts, then ATM would ask the customer to select one account, which from which account he wants to get the cash. So this is common that in Pakistan, our accounts from the same bank are connected to the same card. So we have only one card with 2 or 3 accounts attached to it. So this is the alternate course, right? And there can be an exception, right? It is not here, but it must be. Exception is that maybe I haven't got the enough amount in my account. I want to withdraw 10,000 rupees and I have got only 6,000 in my uh, account. So it will just terminate the transaction by telling me that I haven't got the enough fund or enough balance, and it will ask me whether I want to start a new transaction or not, and then I'll go towards the new transaction. So now home assignment. In fact, you will have to get the requirements, how to place an order, right? And keeping in mind the studied template, the template we have seen over here, this one, right? Place bet. We will study this, we will consider this particular template, and then we will in fact write down some use case description for the place order. So now check what must be the precondition, what must be the post condition, what must be the main flow, alternate flow, exceptional flow. So you will have to study, you will have to write down, and then you will have to place all that in particular template, right? And submission is before the next class, so you will have to upload before the next class. So the advice in the end, try to read from this lecture, the video lecture, along with the book and website, so that it will enhance your knowledge. It will provide you extra knowledge in the form of more examples, and you will be able to manage and handle your project along with the interview in the future. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.